For those people that aren't able to attend with us today, this is our book study number 2 for The Millionaire Teacher, rules 3 and 4. We're going to be chatting about today, and lucky to have my dad with us once again to help me out with any difficult questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share the PowerPoint that I put together. And Dad, can you just confirm you can see this again?
I can see it.
Beauty. Okay, so here we go. So just a quick summary of Rule 3. He talks about the biggest stock market secret, that the stock market isn't random, but it's actually a predictable patterned system. And he talks about how stock prices are determined and how investors can use this knowledge. So I just kind of generated 3 questions to guide our discussion. And the first one is, how can we help students understand the concept of market predictability and how it can inform investment decisions? And kind of the second question goes along with it, which is about market timing and long-term investment decisions. So I'm actually going to turn this one over to the pro, Jim. Sure. Dad, if you wouldn't mind answering this or okay, giving your, what's that?
First of all, don't refer to me as a pro. My portfolio was down 20% this year, like everybody else's. So. Oh. But as to predictability over the past 90 years, and this author mentions this, I think it was in chapter 2, I'm not sure. The stock market overnight, the past 90 years has exceeded 9%. And that said, there are lots of hiccups, but this 9% return includes crashes of 1929, the Great Depression, 1973 and 74, the market was down big time, 87, which certainly I lived through, and 2008. However, when it's down, a lot of people panic. He talks about this. That's not the thing to do, because within 2 years, historically, it's always come back. And it's a real temptation. Even last week, I was back in Canada and had a nice dinner with Jill. I just went back for a week. And I was tempted to meet with my broker because after the Silicon Valley Bank went down, we had quite a few bank stocks. I thought, gosh, maybe I should lighten up. But I didn't. And the market's starting to come back again. But there's always that temptation. And so that's what I would say, is that historically you look at it, and even though it will have some hiccups along the way, over the long term, and that's what this whole book is about, over the long term, it's still the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I guess a question for the group, after reading this chapter, for those of you that had a chance to read it, have your perceptions of the stock market changed after reading the chapter? If anyone wants to jump in, turn on their camera, write in the chat. Happy to hear from all of you as well. Any changed perceptions? Like, did you know that the stock market is actually predictable over time if you look at trends and past crashes and things like that?
I can't say that I knew it was predictable, but I was advised to basically invest and then forget about it. Forget that you invested. Yeah. In the argument of it's going to go up and down, and kind of like Jim had said, don't pull it out because it'll come back, but don't watch it or you'll get anxious.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Laura, did you have?
Good point. That's a good point, and I'm terribly guilty of that. I watch it every day, especially since I've been retired.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be pretty humbling to look at your portfolio.
Hi, Lindy. I have to admit, I didn't really know much about the stock market other than the fact that you hear people say, buy low, sell high, and get out, and yet when you're reading this, that totally goes against his advice. So I found rule number 3, the whole thing was quite a dry read for me because I don't have money to invest. And so I was like, okay, so I've taken it into consideration, that, you know, if I am going to invest, I know to do index funds. So, but yeah, like, I mean, I have no debt, but I'm still, you know, I have kids that I'm helping and things like that. So eventually maybe I can start putting some, I have RSPs, but that's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it was all pretty new to me. I haven't really invested the time to even, you know, find out what was said about it before, other than what you hear people say.
Okay. Great point. Thanks for sharing that.
I know.
Lindy, sorry, Jill. Yeah.
Oh, no, I think Debbie had a comment.
No,
Okay.
go ahead, Jim, and I'll make mine after.
Oh, okay, well, Lindy, you make the point that you have kids and there's nothing more important than family. We all know that. And, but at some point when you do have some disposable income, if we ever do, when the kids are gone, you know, it's important to invest basically on a monthly basis if you can. Because that way over time, you're going to do fine. And I used to say to clients, you know, you can authorize the banks to take it right out of your paycheck. And my mindset there was, if you don't see it, you're not going to spend it, because so many of us tend to spend based on our wants and not our needs. And that said, there has to be balance to it all. Jill knows the secretary used to work for me, and I said she was overtrained. Her husband never took a vacation or anything, because sometimes she would sit in on meetings with me. And I would say to her, you know, take a vacation, you know, you've got to, she was so focused on saving. So you can take it to the extreme, because life is a balance. It's choices, you know, whatever we make it.
Yes, thank you. I totally agree. But, and for the record, my kids are gone and I'm still helping them.
Yeah,
So, but it is what it is. And yeah, no, I mean, like you said, family's more important and I want to see them not struggle. But I think we have to make it happen. We have to consciously, like you said, just start doing it and put it away. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, wonderful. Any other final comments? I know Martha mentioned how the chapter was also a little dry, and some of them can be a little dry. And Martha, just a quick congrats on your new position. It's really exciting. Happy for you. Okay, so we'll move right along here. We're to about 10 minutes in. So looking at Rule 4, can you guys still see my screen? I'm hoping.
Yep. You have room.
Okay, great. Okay, so so Rule 4, a quick summary is just the author explains how to build a low-cost diversified portfolio of index funds that require minimal maintenance. He also provides example of different asset allocations and the potential returns of each. So breaking this down into how can we apply this to students, how can we help students understand the power of compound interest and the benefits of investing in the stock market over the long term? So I was talking to my dad about this a little bit earlier, and the beauty of compound interest and starting from a young age is the rule of thumb that if you can get 10% return on your portfolio over 10 years, your investment should double. And so that's how, you know, money grows. And we tell students, I told my students, even in the financial workplace classes, like, even if it's $10 a month, even if it's $20 a month, like, start now because of the beauty of compound interest. And I, you know, I've been trying to do that throughout my career, and there are different seasons of my life where it's been harder to put away as much money. And I know that I don't have kids, but I know that people with kids in daycare or putting kids through college, you know, there will be different seasons of your life where you do have to adjust what you're saving. But compound interest is such a beautiful thing. Anyone else have anything to add to that? Please speak up.
In a different context, I had saw I think it was a YouTube video that talked about compounding, but it was unfortunately about the COVID virus. But it was a really good visual of a pond with lily pads, and how it started with one lily pad and it doubled to 2, no big deal, doubled to 4, no big deal, doubled to 8, no big deal. But there was a certain tipping point where then all of a sudden the pond was completely covered. And that's when it kind of hit home for me.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
It is.
Anyone else have anything to add? Anyone want to share like your experience with saving and compound interest and how it's worked for you? Or I know teaching students, like teaching compound interest with that formula sometimes isn't meaningful. I found to like my grade 12 boys, and it's this big formula, A equals P onto, you know, the bracket, and they'd say like, what does this mean? How is this useful to me? So it's really neat. I used this book, you know, in these analogies to kind of explain it to them in a more meaningful way so that they can relate. And I just think that's so important, because if we can get them in grade 11 or 12, it's going to be life-changing for them, you know, over time, if they realize the importance of saving young and compound interest.
And Jill, you made
Anything
a good
else?
point.
Yeah.
Well, you made a good point. A lot of people say, like, I don't have any extra money left over. And,
Yeah.
and that's to say, if you do it automatically, you don't see it. And there's another book. In fact, I think your third question here is what resources are available. There's another book that I did a couple of lectures from. It's called The Automatic Millionaire, or The Wealthy Barber, or something like that. And he talks about the latte factor. And, you know, for a lot of people, you know, you go and you maybe have your muffin and your coffee, and you know, it's a very simple analysis, I guess. But if you take that over 5 days, and then you take it over a year in your working career and all like that, it's the money's there. We just tend to spend it on different things, and I'm as guilty as anybody, you know, about that whole philosophy. And that's why I say there has to be a balance to it all too. You know, you're not going to never have a coffee again or never have a muffin again. But it does go to show you, and you know, the power of compounding. It really does work over time. And you know, the analogy you used, was it Martha that used that, or the analogy you used about the lily pond? Yeah, it's very relevant. It does happen over time.
Yeah. That's great. So I know that as the chapters move forward, things become a little bit more complicated, and my goal of this book study is just to explain things in terms that everyone can understand. So in reading it, I started to really learn more about index funds and ETFs. So you can tell from his tone of the book that he is not a fan of mutual funds. He encourages index funds. So Dad, I was wondering if you could, in layman's terms, explain what an index fund is.
Well, it's in the Dow, it's a group of 500 companies in the U.S. That index funds invest in. And the beauty of an index fund, there's not a lot of trading in it. You know, the broker or whomever invests in it, you know, you give your money and they invest in it. And there's not a lot of trading in and out. The problem, as he cites with mutual funds, is that the people that benefit the most are the brokers, because they get a commission going in. The investor doesn't see it. So if I buy a $10,000 mutual fund, you know, I don't see the money, but it does go to the broker and the firm. Also, there's a trailing fee based on a percentage of the value of the mutual fund, and then also a commission coming out. Index funds, are not actively traded, and so you don't get that in and out and in and out. And I've always said, and no disrespect for brokers, I had some brokers in my clientele, and the problem I had sometimes, if the mortgage payment's due at the end of the month, and you give them full carte blanche to deal with your investments, they might say, gosh, I have my mortgage payment due. I better flip, you know, a few stocks for Jim, so I can make a commission, so I can make that mortgage payment. And so I always set mine up that it was never that way. You know, it was my decision in consult with the broker, whether or not they buy or sell, not their decision. So you need to be careful that it's not open-ended. Index funds basically just sit in the TSX, the Toronto Stock Exchange. I can't remember how many companies are in that, but there's not the active trading. The other problem with mutual funds versus index funds, if they're in a non-registered account, by that I mean not an RSP, because if there's trading in an RSP, it's not taxable till you withdraw your RSP. With the TFSA, tax-free savings account, it's not taxable. But with a non-registered fund, let's say you have some extra money and you just think, well, gosh, I maxed out my RSP, I maxed out my TFSA, I need to start investing in something else. With a mutual fund, and this caught me last year, because they trade during the year, even if you don't sell, which I didn't, I get a T3 slip at the end of the year saying I have a capital gain of, I don't know, it's 10 grand or something like that. And that's pretty annoying when you haven't sold, and yet as a unit holder, you're taxed on it. And the author here goes into that as well. So the index fund, you avoid basically those things: A, the trading; B, the commissions, and the taxation, which all three are pretty huge components of one versus the other.
So Laura had asked in the chat, what is meant by minimal maintenance? Does that answer your question, Laura? Kind of the difference between the two? And Dad, like we talked earlier about how an index fund is really a diversified group of the top performing companies, right? So it just follows those companies. So it's very diversified.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And then we have a question from Debbie. Do you need to go through a broker to invest in index funds, or can you do it on your own? You can do it on your own through things like Questrade. You can move your investments to a self-directed website platform called Questrade, and there are online advisors through Questrade. The tricky part about it is that you have to stay on top of it. Am I right in saying that, Dad? Like you have to stay on top of everything. You're managing your own portfolio, but I think you can pay a little bit extra to have an expert there kind of guiding you and watching over things, but it's more self-directed and self-managed.
That's correct. And I don't, I self-manage my own. I have a broker that does it because I don't want to be looking at it. And I think the problem with the self-directed one, like Questrade, is it goes against what we've just talked about, that you don't try and time the market in and out and in and out and all like this. Day traders, drive me crazy because they really affect the market. And what I often look at, and this gets into some depth here, but is what's called a PE ratio, price earnings ratio. What's the price relative to the earnings? And in the tech age, when some of these companies like Tesla, for example, weren't even making money, and yet they were trading at huge high prices. Well, now Tesla's down because other auto companies are coming in with EVs and all like that. So I think it's dangerous. It's cheaper, but I don't do it probably because I'm not smart enough, and I don't want to do it.
But it's definitely doable. Tracy was writing a message. Tracy, Tracy says, how would you suggest someone go about setting teenagers up for investing at a young age? Okay, so I guess when I taught at St. Malachy's, I would start with a simulation using Investopedia, or Scotiabank and bank websites have like iTrade Practice. So I would get them to be comfortable with like looking up stocks, doing a bit of research, just to give them a knowledge. I would also like this book. I don't know if it's too high level for a teenager to read, but I guess investing, do you have to be, I don't even know if you have to be a certain age, Dad. Do you have to be 19?
18, I think. I actually looked
18.
into it.
Did you? Yeah. 18. Okay, so they have to be 18 as a teenager, and then I would assume that they would just do it how we would do it, like finding a broker, or and like Questrade, allowing them to do it on their own might be a little bit scary if they don't have the knowledge. Like I would think they'd have to have kind of a general knowledge of what the stock market is. So I guess starting there. But Dad, do you have any any advice? like, how did I start doing it? I guess when I was young, I think you introduced me to George, like your broker at Nesbitt Burns, and I started giving George, you know, some of my savings and working with him and going from there, I guess when I was 19. Been so
Yeah,
long.
you know, it's like exercise. It becomes a discipline, and it's so
Yeah.
easy not to do it, right? Because it's so easy to find things that we want to spend our money on, and you know, and particularly with teenagers. I think this book, The Millionaire Teacher, is pretty in depth for teenagers. I think a better resource is the Wealthy Barber. I forget his name now, but it's called Automatic Millionaire, and it's more
David Bach.
simple.
Yeah.
David Bach, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more simplistic than this book. This guy gets into some pretty heavy stuff with self-investing. I do like some of his rules of thumb. One of them that kind of hit home to me, you take your age minus 10, and so I'm in my early 70s, so minus 10 would say that I should have 63% of my money in fixed. At your age, Jill, you know, the numbers are different because you're a whole lot younger than I am. And, but that's a good rule of thumb. So when I get back home, I am going to sit down and do a pie graph of our portfolio to say what percentage is in fixed, what percentage is in equities, and I may have to rebalance. He talks about that. I don't know whether we've gotten to that yet in this book or not, but he talks about that in the book as well, that on an annual basis, sit down with your broker if you're using one and rebalance your portfolio. So I do like that rule of thumb because, of course, the mindset is as you get older, you don't theoretically have as many years left to live, so you don't take as many risks as you would say at your age. And so that's a good rule. I like that actually, and it causes me pause to say, "Gosh, I better look at my own."
Yeah. Laura just shared the Automatic Millionaire link to the book. It's a great book. And then The Wealthy Barber is another good book to read. But I really love the Automatic Millionaire. Maybe we'll do a book study next year on that one. I will say that every time I meet with my broker, we do a risk assessment. So my risk level is high right now, my risk tolerance, because I am younger. And I do have that time horizon to ride out the ebbs and flows of the market, right? But as I get older, my risk tolerance is obviously going to be lower for doing risky trades and things like that. So we are at 3:53. Are there any final comments, questions? Any question, like financial question? It doesn't even really have to be related to the book. Any tax questions? With tax season happening. Okay. If you have any, feel free to email me after the fact, but that brings us kind of to the end of Rule 3 and Rule 4 for today. So our next meeting is going to be actually on Rule 5 and 6, and it's April 27th. And then we have 7 and 8 on May 18th, and then we'll have our dinner meetings in June 1st. So I'm going to start booking reservations for those, or we can meet in person, and I'll do a little traveling province roadshow for that. So if there aren't any other questions, I so appreciate your attendance today, and thanks again, Dad, and thanks to everyone that engaged and contributed. And Matt Buckley, it's so nice to see you on here. My former colleague, Matt Buckley, is with us. We shared a classroom last year and I drove him bananas. So it's nice to see you, Matt. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, nice to hear your voice. So that's it. So I'm going to stop recording here and we'll be done.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Enjoy.